break down how we can work from that big map of curriculum into some more detailed work of what this actually looks like in the classroom and what kinds of tools students can use on their own. So again, like Erin had, she had some tools. I'm going to put together a little toolbox for you. So the first tool that I have here is rubric to checklist. So I'm sure that all of you are familiar with something I call rubric fever, where you just see so much description there. And so if it's overwhelming for us, you can imagine what it feels like for students. So this first tool I have here is the literary analysis PBAT, and I just changed it from the rubric into a checklist. And for each checklist point here, you have a resource that will help students and teachers teach to that point on the rubric. And there's just one that I wanted to highlight here. Consortium teachers are, I'm sure, familiar with the emphasis on engagement. So what does engagement look like in the English classroom, and how do students really engage in order to do their PBATs? And from my experience, this is all about text selection. So this is a little barometer of engagement that you can use in your classroom to choose books that are going to get students to buy in from the beginning. And it just has some really simple questions. I actually took this from Alison Bechdel's test to see if I can't remember the name of it, so I wouldn't use that. But so is there room for choice at some point during the unit? Are kids able to choose the text that they want to read? Do whole class texts include adolescents or teenage students speaking and acting in ways that your students understand? So thinking 21st century, late 20th century rather than 17th century teenagers, or even 18th or 19th are hard too. And then if it does not include adolescent or teenage characters, are the social issues presented relatable and relevant to students' lives? And then just a little tip I have down here is one way to test out engagement with students. That's very simple. And then also, if the book that you're choosing and the central conflict is a mid to late life crisis, you might want to reconsider, okay? Because it's just not that relatable to students. So the next thing I'm going to show you, this is the barometer for engagement, right here. And the next thing I'm going to show you is what this might look like in the classroom. And this is a video with Rowan, a student of mine. And this is really at an end of a repeated series of lessons that I find myself doing again and again that makes the process of the PBAT and really writing a literary analysis paper in college visible. And so I'm just going to show you a little clip, and then I'm going to talk through some of the things that you see him doing here. So this is Rowan, and this is a recent unit that we're doing on the horror and gothic.
Is predisposed to commit acts of violence, and they're in a leadership position, his subordinates are more likely to blindly obey. So I looked at page 130 through 137 and broken into three categories. The group compliant to.
Okay, so I just want to tell you a couple things that we see up here. So one thing is that you see all these little post-its, and this is a group project. So students were each charged, they read a passage together, and then they had to choose a line of inquiry, and each student had to produce 3 or 4 post-its, you can decide. And then they had to look at their post-its together, and they had to arrange them, sort them in ways that made sense. And what this does is it teaches students organization, which is one column on our rubric. So what does it mean to organize your thinking? This makes thinking visible and tangible. So students do that, and what that also helps them do is deductive rather than inductive reasoning, which I always get confused, but then I think of inducing labor, when you pull something out, kind of more or less. So this is deductive, when you start with the evidence and then you draw a conclusion based on evidence, and that's a huge challenge for students and I think for most people. So this post-its really help the students do that. And then what you see here is a draft of a claim that students did the day before. And then what I did during this period is I gave students a quick mini lesson on how to elevate their claims. And then once they elevate their claim, they get a claim to fame sheet or a golden ticket. And even though they're seniors in high school, they still want that orange piece of paper. It would kind of blow your minds. So this is his revised claim here. And then what I have the students do is they take turns being students and teachers. So you'll see that Rowan is over here, there's another teacher here, and then the other kids from the group will circulate, and then they switch. So what this allows students to get is a wide array of claims and practice in a low stakes environment that really mimics what we're asking students to do in both the PBAT and what they're going to have to do when they go to college to write an analytical paper. So these are 3 tools, the visible process, and I have some more resources here that really break down how to get here, and then the barometer for engagement, and then moving the rubric to checklist. And these 3 things work well together, and I found them foundational for this process.
Now, one of you can, wait, before we stop, can you just pretend we're the principals? Can you do when you go off and you have a chance now to look at the site and the binder, just say, here's what you'll find.
Okay. So when you go to look at the binder, one thing you're going to find are the series of lessons that break down that visible process that I just showed you. And another thing you'll find is the rubric into the checklist, and the barometer for engagement is just one of those resources. So you can look through that whole checklist and find a few things that teachers might want to use in their curriculum.
Additionally, in the binder you can find all of the work that was talked about today, including other resources so that you can get a big picture on how to frame a ELA classroom, how to work within grade levels, and find a set of tools for teachers to develop and work.
All right. Hey.